Hi, and welcome to The Backline. My name is Theron Woods, and today my guest is Jay Kott. I met Jay in Nashville back a few months ago and ended up getting to work with him and had the pleasure of getting to sit down and talk to him and get to know him. But today I'd like for you to get to know him like I have. And so Jay, how's it been going?
Pretty good, Theron. Surviving and thriving, man.
Yeah.
How about you?
It's been doing well.
Cool.
It's been a few months since we talked, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of things have happened since then.
You could say that. Been an eventful year.
Yeah.
Uneventful and eventful at the same time.
Yeah. I
Weird.
think I left thinking it was going to be I'd be back soon, and I haven't been back since. Until I came down to see you.
Yeah, well, appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to see you, buddy.
So tell us kind of, what have you been doing lately before we get into kind of where Jay started?
Well, I mean, strangely, things have kind of started to ease back into a routine in the city. The honky tonks are back open to a little bit of a degree. The recording world didn't get affected too heavily, so I've been fortunate enough to be recording a fair amount over the last few months. That's kind of kept the lights on. And playing with a couple bands, doing a little bit of some touring with our old buddy Pryor and 𝐓𝐿𝐿,
Yeah.
and I've been out with those guys a little bit, and then working with this great artist, Theron Is, just awesome person, great singer, great songwriter. And yeah, other than that, kind of just, I had a big old garden this year in Nashville. That was really fun, and just have been just trying to keep myself sane through all of this, craziness we're living in these days.
Yeah, it's like going back to Little House on the Prairie at times.
Man, I'm cool with that.
Surprisingly. too.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, go back to the country.
Yep.
So, Jay, you've had as I've gotten to know you, you've always had a great story with everyone you've played with, but from the time you started, it's amazing how many different things you've actually done, how many different styles of music and just different roads you've been on. I kind of don't even really know where to start. So why don't you just start back, like what got you to where you're holding this guy?
Yeah, wow, that's
Or girl, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't know, is this a girl or a guy? I haven't named her yet. She's a new one. I call her a girl already.
right.
So, man, yeah, music's weird. It's always kind of been my first language, even before I realized it. And I took a year of piano lessons at 5 years old, and just I've never been much for school type atmosphere. Even back then, I just wasn't having it. And we had a piano at home, and so I just played every day after that for many years and drove my mother crazy. And that led to my grandfather, who was also a organist, kind of just hobbyist and musician, loved music so much. And he was a Marine, and he was really into like the Marine band. So we would ride around in his car, like listening to 𝐓𝐿𝐴 marches and like America the Beautiful and all these awesome symphonic pieces. And I was just always really drawn to the low brass, and I didn't know it at the time what that was. I just liked those heavy sounds, the low sounds, and so and I always sang in school and was in choir when I was in elementary school. And strangely, my best friend growing up was a drummer, and his father was my elementary school music teacher. And in second grade, I very specifically remember a day where we were sitting there, and it was our music class in this school was actually in the cafeteria of the elementary school, and he had a little Spinet, like a little Spinet console piano, and we would sit on the lunch tables, like kind of behind him in the piano, and he would have his back to us, and he'd be playing, and I just loved music class. I hated school, even at that age. I did not want to be there. I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't like being inside. Yeah. So I was just like, get me out of this place. But music was like I always felt really comfortable there, and I looked forward to that. And that and recess and lunch, that's all I cared about. Still to this day.
Right.
And
we still do the same, yeah.
Still to this day, those are my concerns. But and so anyway, we're sitting there singing a song one day, and I was just into it like I was every day, and I always sat right behind him because I just wanted to be close to the sound coming off that piano. And we were singing, and I don't even remember the song, but I remember like mid-song he just stopped, and he turned around and he pointed at me and he goes, "You can sing," and turned right back around and went back into the song. And it was like, I was like, "What, me?" I'm like, "Is he talking to me?" And everybody's looking at me, and I was like, this is weird. And I had no idea really, that was the first moment that I realized that maybe this was something that was for me. I didn't realize that it was that I had a natural ability, basically, you know, and I just was luckily born with pipes, you know, and I worked really hard at it after that. I ended up going to college and studying opera and working on classical voice for most of the rest of my life up until I was about 20 years old after that, and got a full ride to school to do that. And yeah, but starting bass, I guess, so a few years after that, singing again was a big focus. And I had started playing baritone and tuba. And so when I got to junior high school, we had a jazz band. And that was the first time I had ever been in the proximity of a bass guitar. And I was like, I remember watching the jazz band when I was in 7th grade. And you weren't allowed to be in jazz band in 7th grade. It was only 8th and 9th graders. And so, but I remember watching them and being like, dude, that bass thing is cool. I want that. I want to do that. That looks so cool. And the dude who played bass was a guy named Andy Schnurr. And Andy was a tuba player, and I was a tuba player. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This is what I want to do that, right? And so I guess it was the next year, it was 8th grade, I decided I wanted to start trying to play bass. And so I, a couple times, talked to Andy and talked to the other bass player that was in junior high at that time. And like, during jazz band, I was playing tuba in jazz band at the time. Well, every once in a while, they would just let me play the bass, like after jazz band. And I would be like, so 2 or 3 times I did that. And then I was in this vocal quartet, and we got selected to be in this like Michigan State honors choir thing. And it was like, you know, 4 kids from every school in the state, the 4 best singers, a soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. I was a tenor, and our quartet got selected. And so we went down to, you know, we traveled to go to these other schools, and all the kids would come, all these 100 kids would come from all over, and we'd meet up. And we learned X amount of songs, 7 or 8 songs for a performance at this like Michigan School Vocal Association music conference in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That was like the big deal of the whole deal was we're rehearsing for this thing, for this conference, right? And it was really just a way for the choir teachers to kind of show off their best kids and then go to this conference and, you know, oh, there's our kids up there, you know. It was like one of those kind of things.
Just focus
like,
you.
Yeah, and like a spirit building thing for everybody kind of. And so, but the first day of that rehearsal of that honors choir, we were in like, I don't know, Ann Arbor, Michigan or somewhere. And we had sang a couple songs and then took a lunch break. And we came back after lunch and the director was like, okay guys, the song we're about to start with is more of a contemporary number and it has a rhythm section like a drum and bass and keyboards and guitar. And we'd really like to use students from the choir if anybody plays or any of those instruments. And I had played bass like 3 times in my life, seriously, maybe 4. And I had played guitar and I play a bunch of other instruments at that point, piano, tuba, baritone, read music. So I'm like, and he's like, the music is in the score. And so I'm open up the score and I'm reading the bass line. I'll never forget it. It was like, it was D, 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 G, 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 G. I'm a little low. But anyway, those were the notes. And I was like, I can do this. I know I can do this on bass. So I was just like, me. And my buddy sitting next to me, my best friend sitting next to me, looks at me like, what do you play? He said, and I'm like, I play bass. He goes, no, you don't. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I got this. And so the guy was like, yeah, well, you. And I'm like, hey, I play bass. And he's like, cool, bring your bass next time and your amp and we'll get this going. And I was like, oh man, I hope the school lets me borrow their stuff. You know what I mean? Because I don't have a bass or an amp and my family's sure not going to be able to go buy me one. You know, we weren't that fortunate. And so anyway, went back to school after the rehearsal that week or that day, went back to school on Monday, the following day. And I went to my band teacher and I was like, hey, here's the deal. And she was like, of course. Anytime you want it, it's in there. You just let me know. You can take it. You need whatever you need. Take it home. Practice on it. Whatever you need. And I was like, yes. Miss Hanson, she was cool. She loved me, and I loved her. She was a cool lady, and And so that was it. That was how I started playing bass. I literally just my way into it, like completely, just like, oh, I got this, you know. And you know, I think there's a certain level of like I don't think I would have done that if I wasn't able to read music, play tuba, sit there and immediately read that music and hear the part in my mind and know that I could seriously go.
Right.
That was the song, you know, and then there was a bridge in it, and the bridge was like, And I remember being like, what are these weird symbols on there? Because it was like the notes were there, but then there were the symbols for slap and pop, which are like a little circle and a little dot. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I read music really well, but I saw these symbols and I was like, okay, this is some weird stuff. I don't know what that means. And so I went to my buddy, the bass player, the older guy, and I was like, what is this? And he goes, oh, and he showed me, it's called slap and pop. And he showed me, and bro, I'm not even kidding. I broke like 5 strings on that bass in like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We had to go to the guitar store like twice in a couple weeks for me to buy single G strings.
Right.
And I was so worried when I broke the first one because I was like, oh no, I broke the bass. I was like, oh my God. I borrowed this bass from the school. Miss Hanson's going to kill me. I broke the bass, you know?
Yeah.
And of course it was no big deal. It's just a string. And I went and got a new one and I put it on there. And my concern was, hey man, can I get one with the red felt?
Yeah.
You got one with the red felt? And he's like, man, all we got's these silver ones. And I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? They're going to know it's not the red felt. She didn't notice. She didn't care. I mean, yeah, no, it wasn't like that at all, dude. So, I mean, I think after a while I realized, oh, well, that's just what happens with these things, you know.
Yeah.
You break them, you know. And so, yeah, but that's how I ended up with a bass in my hand. And
shop usually.
Right.
So whose fault is that?
This is true. This is very true with that all.
Man. That's really good. Oh yeah. Did you buy Hayes?
Yep.
That's a cool building. Yeah. Nice. everybody that I've spoken to that's come on this show has had, and I mean everyone, has had a teacher that freely gave of their time, resources.
Yeah, man.
They trusted you.
Yep.
You know, that I'm not saying that doesn't happen these days, but it was a little more common back then.
Well, and you know, music is not supported in the public schools these days, man. It's, you know, I have this conversation a lot with people, and people probably get sick of me hearing it and think I'm just some music school nerd because I say stuff like this, but that's why, generally speaking, music isn't as good now as it was 25, 30, 40 years ago, is because kids, like poor kids from everywhere in the country that don't have culture around them, they are not exposed to Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Holst, and you know, they're not exposed to the greatness of music that is 250, 300 years old.
Right.
They're not exposed to that, and so the only thing that they're aware of is what they're hearing on the radio, and so their scope of what good is doesn't count, in my opinion. You know, it just doesn't, man. If you don't have that kind of, and I'm not saying that in a like elitist way, I'm saying like it's just like anything, you know, it's ignorance until you discover it, until you know about it. You know what I mean? Once you know about it, then it's not ignorance anymore.
Right.
So it's like, and it's on, you know, but we're lucky, man. I'm lucky that I had, you know, Mrs. Parrish, and I had Mr. Hayes, and I had Miss Hanson, and I had all these great, Mr. Stokes, you know, Mr. Larimer, all these great teachers that cared enough to be like, you know, to support me in those things and to play me Bach and Brahms and Beethoven and show me the good stuff when I was a kid.
Right.
You know, I was one of those people, I really didn't even care about any modern music really until I got to college.
Right.
I didn't care about it at all. I was wrapped up in classical music, and I listened to music passively because of my friends and stuff. But for the most part, man, it was like, you know, I really wanted to listen to that stuff, and that was the stuff that I was constantly singing and playing, you know.
Do you think it was from, did you say it was your grandpa or that rode around and listened to?
Yeah, to '𝐓𝐿𝐼 marches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that the like early introduction to horns and that sort of, you know, type of music, do you think that pulled you toward the classical sounds and made you want to go that way?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, but you got to think about this too. Like, my mom was from the hippie generation. All her brothers and sisters were all a bunch of like hippies, basically, man. So like, when my first concert was the Beach Boys in the Chicago, I think, or the Beach Boys in Moody Blues. And those are the kind of concerts that we went to as a kid. You know, my parents would, or my mom and her brothers and sisters, usually we would end up going to, you know, music festivals and seeing bands like that, you know, when I was a little kid, dude, like in, you know, 10 or under. And that stuff had a pretty profound impact on me, I think, afterwards, you know. And but I don't know, music, like, because of the simplicity of most modern music, it's easy to look down on it if you're not able to understand. Like, as a youthful player, you want to be able to shred and play fast and do all that stuff. And that's kind of the same mentality of like looking at music where you're judging it by its level of complexity. So, which is something that, as I've gotten older, of course, like, and I've been exposed to more musics that were based on simple ideas. You know, moving to Nashville was something that really, really changed the way I played and thought in regards to that, you know, because I don't know, man, for me, like, music's value was in its cerebral nature before I moved there. And I've learned to embrace the simple as well, and to understand the elegance and learning how to create something that is complex yet simple, or something that is so simple that it's I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but that it's perfect, is really almost more difficult than playing a bunch of stuff and having it be complex, you know. And dude, life is like that. Food is like that. You want to get in the kitchen, you want to screw shit up, put a bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah.
You know, you want something to be really good, keep it real simple.
Yeah.
All those things that's life, man.
Right.
So it's like, music's the same way, but a young man's game is to put all that stuff in there and to try really hard to do that. And then the older guy's game is to be like, whoa, let's pull back on
you don't
that
have to
and
do that.
just put this in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, you kind of learn the value of that simplicity, I think, over time. So.
Something that I think you sort of brought to mind to me was when, you know, I had been to town for an audition, and I didn't get the gig. And then Pryor had contacted me about playing for him. Then I met you through Pryor Baird.
Yep.
And so then when the Brent Cobb sub thing for Mike came up, you called, and so there's something I learned on that gig that even though I've been playing for 30-something years, is going back to simplicity.
Yeah. I had left the corporate gig and had hooked up with blues artist Sun Seals, and we were touring and doing all kind of stuff like that. Went back to Europe and went all up and down the Mississippi a bunch of times. First time I came to Nashville. The first time I ever came to Nashville was for Sun's CD release party at Bourbon Street Boogie and Blues Bar, and for Lettin' Go for the record, and that we ended up recording on. Jimmy Vivino produced the record, and his band, like Conan's late night band, played on the whole record, but we were Sun's live band at the time, and he just loved the way we were playing this song called Funky Bitch. Remember that tune? Yeah, and it's a great old blues standard, and it had been kind of made famous by that jam band Fish, like at least in some circles. I mean, as famous as Fish can make a song. And I'm sure they had made Sun a ton of money by playing that song or recording it, you know what I mean? He probably got a ton of residuals off of that in one way or another, so... but Sun had actually decided to bring Trey from Fish in and have us play with Trey for that song on the record, and added that song kind of as a bonus track to the record that Jimmy Vivino produced, and so which was super cool. But man, you wanna jam that tune a little bit?
Yeah, I can. Yeah? I think I can get it.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, man.
That's
awesome.
Sweet.
Oh,
That's
man.
a cool tune.
Haven't played that one in a long time. It's a great song.
Yeah.
Great song.
So you got to go in and cut that.
Yep. And then we toured with Sun pretty hard for a couple years. Did a bunch of cool festivals in Europe, and up and down the Mississippi a bunch of times, and got to play a bunch of the old dirty juke joints all over America with him, and it was definitely a bit of a learning experience for like a kid from the woods, you know, in northern Michigan. It was like, whoa, man, going to all the big cities and, you know, playing all the legendary spots, man. And it was definitely a bit of a learning situation for me. So
What got you to what? So you went from basically classically trained.
Yep.
To blues.
Yep.
To where'd you go next?
Well, okay, yeah. So after that whole situation with the band, with the Billman brothers, strangely, like another kind of corporate gig came up. It was a casino gig that I did for 3 years or so, up in northern Michigan where I'm from, and it was a good paying gig, but it was terrible gig. I mean, great musicians, great band, but in the casino, like not in a showroom, like in and amongst all of the slot machines, like surrounded by this crazy atonal C major drone that was just like
bell tones,
dude, and you're trying to play in other keys, and it's like I never drank more on a gig in my life. Yeah. The first time I quit drinking was because of that gig.
I had to play one of those in one of those situations, and the casino wouldn't let us drink either.
Oh, see,
it was the most excruciating.
I would have left.
Yeah.
I would have left. Yeah. So, but that was something, and I did that for a few years, and actually that's what led to the gig with Matt Guitar Murphy.
Okay.
Was there, and that dude, I have a funny story from that too. We were playing a blues festival in Traverse City at Turtle Creek Casino, and it was the day I met Matt, and so we're sitting there talking, and he's like, And dude, 𝐓𝐸𝐲 was the headliner that night. No, actually, it wasn't even 𝐓𝐸𝐲. It was �kenny Wayne Shepherd when he was like 18 or 15 or something. And 𝐓𝐸𝐲 was like, it was like McIntyre Murphy, 𝐓𝐸𝐲, Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
Yeah.
You know, and so we're sitting there hanging out in the green room, and actually Matt and I were doing what we're doing right now, just doing some playing, sitting around, showing me some tunes, showing him some tunes, because we were kind of collaborating on the set list and all that.
Yeah.
And he was the nicest man. God, he was just so sweet. And then he was like, oh man, he's like, I want to go say hi to Jeff, man. He's like, Jason, you want to come with me? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Set my bass down, and we go walk over into 𝐓𝐸𝐲's trailer, and like, we come up on the steps and knock on the door, and Jeff goes, yeah, come on in. And Matt walks in, and he goes, Jeff. And 𝐓𝐸𝐲, who, if you don't know, was a blind man, like turned around and goes, Matt. You know, and I was like, whoa, okay, cool. And so we're sitting there, and I didn't say a damn word. I was literally like little quiet boy. I mean, not little, but young quiet boy, standing there just like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm standing here with these two dudes in this room right now. I mean, this is insane. It's like, you know, Roadhouse and the Blues Brothers both, man. What's going on here? And you know what I mean? And so after a minute of them talking, Jeff goes, who's this? And points at me. And I was like, what the fuck? Did I fart? Like, what happened? How did he know? And he probably just heard me breathing or whatever, you know what I mean? And it was like, and so Matt's like, this is Jason, he's my bass player and all this. And he's like, oh, hey, man. And I'm like, he's like, he's from here, this is his hometown and stuff. And he goes, oh, cool, man. And dude, he turned around. He goes, hold on one sec. He turned around, walked down the hallway of this trailer, and I watched him. And he walked right down the hallway and bent down into his duffel bag like this and went, and came back that fast, came right to me, handed me 2 of his business cards and goes, hey, man, I just opened a blues club in Toronto. And he's like, if you got a band that wants to come up there, or if you ever are just in Toronto and you want to, here's my card, man, with my phone number. He's like, call me, let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy hell, did that just happen? I can't believe that just happened. And I was like, sweet, man, you know. And he ended up dying a few years later, you know. And it was, never got a chance to do that. But still, it was like, that moment was so just like mind-blowing to me, the whole thing. You know, and then going out and crushing it and having a good time with those guys. So
if you don't know who 𝐓𝐸𝐲 is, I'm sitting like he plays, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, go check him out. He is Angel Eyes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Woo, what a tune. I mean, that was his big hit, but it was a worthy one. It was a great song. Yeah. So, but anyway, after that, like, I just kind of played the blues for a few more years, and then I developed that duo that I was talking about with my drummer buddy, and we started doing this kind of weird electronic, jazzy, reggae. It was fun, really experimental and weird music, but so fun and real free and loose. And we were playing a lot of like resort town type gigs on, you know, decks and patios next to the water and wherever else, ski hills sometimes, and all of that. And and so after we did that for a few years, we met this buddy through another buddy. We met this guy named Brent James through a friend of ours named Kenny Olson, who was Kid Rock's original guitar player.
Brent James, he is a songwriter?
He is a songwriter. He's from Ohio. Yeah. And, well, he's from Michigan originally, but he's been in Ohio, and he has a band called the Vintage Youth now, Brent James and the Vintage Youth. We were Brent James and the Contraband. You know, typical Nashville style. They always got to put the artist name first. It can't be a band. It's got to be dude plus the band.
Yeah.
It's just so stupid, but they do that all the time.
Yeah.
And so they can, you know, fire us replaceable, you know, non-essential guys whenever they want to, you know, for like the vibe being off and stuff like that.
Right.
And so so anyway, we meet this Brent guy. His band is kind of like just kind of flaky and whatnot. And so he ends up getting my number. We end up talking through another friend, and eventually I end up playing on some demos that he's producing with this guy. And then pretty much the dude ends up kind of like flaking, and I end up kind of producing these demos out for Brent and playing every instrument on them. You know, keyboards, percussion, guitar, singing harmony, playing bass, and making the stuff. And it was great. It turned out so good. And so anyway, Brent takes these demos, and we start playing a little bit of some gigs together, just regionally in Michigan. And one thing leads to another, and within about a year, we're literally on tour with Stone Temple Pilots. And we did a tour with Alice Cooper. Yeah. We did a tour with Ted Nugent. We did a long tour with Ted Nugent, and so through all of that, Brent got a deal in Nashville, and so I'm going to tell a Ted Nugent story real quick, but we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
Because this is in the middle of that, and it's like, I need to tell this story.
Okay.
Because it's a really good one, and it was something that made me realize that not everybody in the music industry is a jerk and an egotist and a shitty person. So we're on the tour with Ted Nugent. It's the first night of the tour. We were playing somewhere, I don't remember where, but it was like there was a giant freight elevator backstage, and the stage was on the second floor. And so you had to like load all your stuff on this elevator downstairs, and then it came upstairs and load all your gear off, and then you were basically right on the stage, like backstage. And so they were very tyrannical the first few days. They were like, you play your set. When you're done, you break your gear down and you load it out immediately. We don't want any gear sitting around backstage anywhere. By the time Ted Nugent takes stage, your gear has to be loaded out. And so we were like, okay. And in that band, like the drummer was 6'8", 250. I was 6'3", 250. We were the hosses. And so we sent the little, singer and guitar player out front to deal with the merch. And we were like, we'll take care of all the gear. You guys go sell the stuff. And so we're sitting there hossing all this stuff onto this elevator, and up walks 𝐓𝐎𝐒𝐒𝐓, the coolest guy maybe in the world.
Yeah.
And walks up and he goes, and if you don't know who he is the voice of Ted Nugent. He is the voice of Cat Scratch Fever. He's the voice of what's the other one? Anyway, yeah, all of them. He sang all of the good songs, and he's actually a way better guitar player than Ted Nugent is too. And he looks cooler. Derek, you're the man, dude. I love you.
I actually saw him earlier in the year at Carter, and
he's
fedora.
He's the coolest dude
rings,
alive, I think. He's awesome, and he's so nice and funny. He's from Detroit, so he has no filter, and I appreciate that with people. Bluntness, man. We got it up there.
Yeah.
And so,
we're all.
Yep. And so exactly, bro. And so he walks up and he says, "Man, I loved your set." I'm like, "I'm Jay." He's like, "I'm Derek." I'm like, "Yeah, no." And he was like, and "This is Matt." And he's like, "Cool, man." And so immediately helps us start loading all of our gear onto the elevator. And I'm like, wow, what a dude, man. This guy rules. So we get on the elevator. He gets on with us. He rides down with us. The whole time we're talking about Michigan. We're talking, because we're all from Michigan. We're talking about Nashville. We're talking about the music. We're talking about everything. And it's like, this guy's he's one of us. Like, I feel like I'm one of him more like, you know what I mean? This dude is like, I'm him kind of. And so we get down to the bottom. Elevator stops, doors open. Nugent's bass player and drummer are standing there, and they're hella annoyed that the elevator is full of our gear because they want to go upstairs. They got 15 minutes till showtime. Guy literally was like, "Oh man, we got 15 minutes till show." Bass player or drummer, I'm not sure which one said it. And so Matt and I immediately are like, "Oh man, sorry." We jump off and we start hustling. Dude, Derek helps us. Their singer helps us unload the whole trailer. He's already dressed in his gear. He's already looking like he did at Carter that day. Yeah. Just pimp, hat, the whole deal.
Black
right?
scarf.
Yeah, the denim coat, just perfect, dude.
Yeah.
He's like, helps us unload the whole trailer, or the whole elevator. Those dudes go up, and he stands there while we put everything in cases. Because, at that point, it was literally like drums on stands,
Throw it off,
cables piled on pedal boards, guitars on guitar boat stands. Nothing was put away. And all our cases were... Where were our cases? Doesn't matter. Anyway,
off.
we sat there and put everything together. Derek stood there, talked to us the whole time we're packing the gear up, right? And literally, I go and get the van and trailer, pull it back around, and come back. He's still standing there talking to us. So I start loading the trailer. Dude helps us load the entire trailer. And I'm not talking about, oh, here's a guitar stand. I'm talking about he's grabbing one half of the hardware case and all the heavy shit, the bass amp. He's like, and I'm like, wow, dude, this is so cool. He was so freaking cool. And so, and one thing he said, the one critique he had, he was like, "Man, I got to tell you, you guys are so good. I love the band." He's like, "You guys got to stop playing that cover in your set." And I was like, "Well, why?" Like, the cover, they hate, your crowd literally swears at us and calls us every name under the sun until we play that cover. And then when we play that cover, they're like, "Oh, these guys are cool," Yeah. And so, he helped us load the whole trailer, and I was like, "Man, this dude is so cool. I can't believe how cool this guy is. He's so nice, and he like literally took all this time for us." And so the only thing that he said was one single critique to the band. He said, "Man, take the cover out of your set. We were doing Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith and killing it, like crushing it. It was one of our best songs, even in probably above our originals, kind of, you know, like. And Nugent's crowd literally were throwing things at us, calling us all kinds of lovely names, you know, stuff that could definitely be considered a hate crime these days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're yelling all that at us, and we're like, wow, this is intense, you know? And they hated us every song until we played that song. Once we played Sweet Emotion, they were like, all right, these guys are good. And then we came with our two biggest, like, rah, after that. And then they were like, yeah, they loved us, right?
Yeah.
And so Derek told me that, and I was like, man, and I just said, dude, that's the deal. They hate us until we play that. I mean, I'll tell the boys what you said. We'll talk about it. And he's like, man, I'm just telling you, you should take it out of there. And I was like, I know. And so I go to Derek, we get in the van later, and I'm telling this story to everybody, probably a much longer version. And I get to that point, and I'm like, yeah, but Derek said we should take the cover out. And so we all talk about it, and we decide we can't. Like, if we take it out, we might get killed.
Right.
These people literally might, like, come unglued on us. Like, and so the next night, and dude, Derek would watch every show, even after this. This was the second show, though. So the second show, we go to start our set, and I see Derek pop into the wings, and he's just sitting there watching, right? And so we get going and everything and play the first song, you know, and the crowd's like, we hate you, you know, you terrible people, but in much fouler language. And get to the second song, we crush it, and they're still hating us. And I look over there, and Derek's still there, and then we start Sweet Emotion, and it's, you know, it starts with the harmonies and everything. And so we get going on that. We get through that section, right? And we started at the and I'm off the mic, so I turn over to the drummer right this. So I turn sideways. Derek's over there, and I look up, and he sees me look at him, and he's standing here like this. And as soon as I look at him, he turns around and walks out. And I was like, oh, ouch. You know, and so we finished the set, and I set my bass down. As I set my bass down, Derek St. Holmes walks out onto the stage and grabs Brent, the singer, by the shoulder and pulls him off stage. And he's over there in his face like this. And Brent's a little dude, you know. He's a little kind of frail, little kind of fellow, and he's just in the guy's face like this, right? Brent comes back all white-faced, and he goes, we're taking the cover out of the set.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the end of it.
We never played Sweet Emotion again, even.
We did, but not on the Ted Nugent stage. Nope, never another cover on that stage. And you know, I mean, his point was this. He said, do you want them to remember you as that band that did that really great Sweet Emotion cover, or do you want them to remember your best song?
Fantastic point.
And I was like,
yeah,
dude, that makes sense to me,
yeah.
You know? And I remember saying that to the band that night, and they were like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but literally the names, the things they're calling us, man,
that's
they're
the only
you know,
thing that gets a hook
woo,
in them.
dude, yeah. And so that was interesting,
yeah.
But that band, so we toured and did all this stuff for years and years, and all of our business, everything was in Nashville. And so I'm driving 800 miles from northern Michigan to Nashville twice a month, you know.
Ouch.
And the band's paying for the gas and paying for the food and all that. So, I mean, but it's costing the band a ton of money. I mean, a ton of money. And so after doing this for several months, I go to management and Brent, the singer, and I was like, hey, man, you know, why don't you guys just give me a little bit of dough, you know, like maybe a couple trips worth of dough, 3 or 4 trips worth of dough, and I'll just move to Nashville. And that way I'm down there, and it'll be much easier. You know, we can make things work, and there'll be a place for a guy to stay there and all that. So, you know, and so they said, yep, good idea. Let's do that. And so then my girlfriend at the time that I was living with we were actually living in Petoskey, Michigan at the time. I come to her about it, and I'm like, here's the deal. This is what I think I want to do, and I really want you to come with me. And so without much hesitation, bless her, she was like, let's go. And so we moved we decided a week later or so, or a couple weeks later, we made plans, and we went down to Nashville for 10 days and stayed at my manager's house out in Whites Creek. Corey Gearman was managing our band at the time, and stayed out at his place, and we went into town every day and drove around, went here, went there, looked at all metro scene in the newspaper, online, trying to find somewhere to live. Everywhere we found was like really expensive, super corporate, all of these things, and we just didn't find anything that we liked. I mean, eventually we might have settled on some sort of corporate apartment, you know, but we just were like, man, we don't really want that. Like, we kind of want to live in a house. We kind of want to like live in this particular neighborhood in East Nashville that we were looking for. And so we were on tour like a couple weeks later, and there used to be a parking lot across from Tin Roof on Demumbrians, now like a condo or some hotels or something. And tour buses used to just pull in there when bands were on tour. And so our bus was parked next to Uncle Cracker's bus. And in the morning, Uncle Cracker's drummer, who's an old friend of mine, came and like knocked on the bus door and was like, "Wake Jay Kott up," you know. And so they came inside and woke me up and said, "Hey man, some dude named Clint's out here and wants to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh, that's Cliffy." And get off, and I see him, and he's like, we hug, and he's like, "Dude, we're gonna go into the Tin Roof and get food." And I'm like, "Let's go." We go in there, we sit down, we're eating lunch, and this guy walks in, and he knows the guys in the band, and they're all like, "Oh man, bro, what's up, what's up?" And I'm like, dude comes and sits next to me. Hey, he goes, "Hey man, my name's Peter 𝐓𝐿𝐒." I'm like, "Hey Peter 𝐓𝐿𝐒, my name's Jay Kott, nice to meet you, man." And he's like, "Yep." He's like, "You're from Michigan?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so we start talking Michigan. He lived in Michigan for like 10 years. He played with P-Funk for like 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like, damn, dude, that's like literally the band that made me appreciate modern music was P-Funk. Like, classical music, that was like the closest thing to the arrangements of classical music where I was like, this stuff's heavy.
Yeah.
There's 10 singers and 3 guitar players and 4 keyboard players and a bass player and a synth bass player and 2 drummers, and it's all sounds so good, you know. And I was blown away. And so that immediately was like, dang. And he's like, "Yeah, but now I'm actually playing with Leonard Skinner." And I was like, oh, what? I mean, that's like you're talking about complete opposite ends of the spectrum there musically, you know, let's be honest. And so I was like, man, that's amazing. And so we start talking, and I'm like, man, you know, I've been trying to move down here, and I came down and tried to find a place, and I had such a hard time with my girl, and we don't know what we're going to do. And he goes, "Oh, take this phone number down." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "This is my old landlord." He's like, "I used to live in this apartment right in 5 Points, East Nashville." And he's like, "And I think it just became available again, and it's the place you want," is what he said. Exactly what he said. "It's the place you want." And I was like, cool, man. And so I called my awesome landlords, Susan Hansen. I think it was Susan that I had the contact for, not Larry, her husband. And so I called Susan, and she's just a champ. She's one of the nicest people I've ever met. And we start talking, and she sends me the info, and my girl at the time and I go online, and we start looking at all the pictures of the house and everything, and we're like, this is really great. This is exactly what we want. It's right in our price point. You want to do it? Let's do it. Okay, let's do it. Text Susan, "Hey Susan, this looks amazing. Please forward any paperwork that you need, and let us know where you want us to send a deposit. We'd really like to take the place on." And she's like, she texts me back, "Don't worry about it. Just come on down. We'll take care of it when you get here." And I was like, what?
Once you get moved in.
And I remember looking at Betsy, and she was like, "So we're going to go and move our entire life 800 miles, and we're not going to have any paperwork or anything, and not going to have a deposit on this place?" And I'm like, I know, but I mean, I guess if she's trusting us enough, we should probably trust her enough. And she was like, "Yep." And so we moved our butts to Nashville, and yeah, and it was cool. It was cool for a while, and then literally almost a year to the day, the wheels came off the bus for the band, and the band broke up. And so I was actually on salary from that band, and I lived in Nashville almost a year. But if you don't know anything about Nashville, like if you live Nashville, the first year that you're there, you might as well be a ghost.
Yes.
You might as well be invisible, because people will be nice and they will talk to you and all of that, but no one's ever going to call you for anything. You're not going to get any gigs. You're barely going to make $1 from music the first year you live there. Until you've been there a year, you don't live there. And then after that year, it's weird. Things just immediately start happening after you've been there a year. It's almost like some weird clockwork stuff, you know? And so I had been there literally a year. I barely knew anybody because I was touring with a band also that whole time, so I was gone a lot. And so anyway, the kind of financial hardships that came about after that, of me really not having a salary for a couple months and everything, it really started putting pressure on my relationship, and things just kind of fell apart. And so, and that was tragic, because Betsy is a great girl, and I love her still to this day. But like, it was tough in that moment, and she was basically under the assumption that she was going to stay in our apartment and I was going to leave because I didn't have a pot to piss in, quite literally at that point. And a buddy of mine called me and was like, hey man, I want you to come to this meeting. And I'm like, okay. And so I ended up going to a meeting and meeting all of these singers and band leaders that play the local scene in Nashville. And I literally left that meeting with 11 gigs for the next week. And I felt very like triumphant in that moment. And in something that was very out of character for me, I came back to the house and sort of basically told Betsy that if we weren't going to be together, that, you know, that she can leave now. And I'm not leaving. I'm staying here in the apartment. And she was like, well, how are you going to afford that? And I said, well, it's really not your concern anymore. And that was kind of the end of that. And it was hard, man. It was really heartbreaking and hard. And, you know, I don't know if I would do that again or if I would leave. You know, I don't know. I would maybe, I don't know. It's not something that I regret at all necessarily, but at the same time, like, it's just, that's out of character for me. I'm the kind of person that if something like that were to happen, I would usually just be like, okay, here you go. I'm out. You know what I mean? And it just,
I'll get the lights.
There was something about it that just made me have to kind of stand up for myself, sort of, is what I felt about it. And you know, I mean, we're still friends to some degree. You know, I wish we were more friends, you know, but she, you know, it's probably hard for her to look past a lot of that. So, but anyway, that's heavy topic. But, but yeah, Nashville, then after that, it was like, I kind of started playing the local scene in Nashville, and that was great, and started doing some recording, and it was like, man, one thing led to another there. So before we moved to Nashville, before I even came to Nashville for the first time with the band to record the record, we were on tour with Nugent, and after we did all that, it was summertime, and I was really booked up playing locally in Michigan with my friend Matt, with my drummer buddy, and I was on my way home from a gig at like 1:30 in the afternoon, and there was a elderly woman in a brand new Lincoln, second in line, oncoming, in a middle lane, waiting to turn left in front of us. And I was in a car by myself with a bunch of my gear, going 60, and she just decided last minute to pull out into my lane and go around the guy that was in front of her to try to make the left. And I was literally right there going 60, and I hit her so hard that my car spun around 4 times and ended up off the road, and I broke 8 ribs in my right ankle and 3 vertebrae in my back. And what I forgot to say was the day before that, the singer Brent from Brent James and the Contraband calls me and says, hey man, I got this great opportunity in Nashville to go down and record this record with this Grammy Award winning producer, and we want to do it at this time. And so I was like, I went and looked at the dates, and I was like, man, it's like I have I have $2,000 worth of work or more while he wants to go to Nashville and record this record for free. You know, like I won't be paid to do it because it's a band thing, right? So we're going down there to record this record on our own dime. And I was like, man, I don't know if that's a smart move for me at this point when I'm in my busy season, playing gigs, trying to stock up money for the winter. That's how I used to have to do it in Michigan. And I was like, I had pretty much in my mind decided I wasn't going to do it, or that he was going to have to get off some money to get me to come down there, one or the other. Right. And it's nothing personal. It's just business, man. I can't screw up my life for someone else's dream, you know? Right. And so, it was funny, man. And so the next day, boom, get in this car accident, break all of my shit, literally sitting there just, you know, and in the hospital, like the first or second day after that, I'm sitting there, and 2 of my really good friends come in, Tim Miller, Spencer Shattuck, and good buddies of mine. And the first day I'm in the hospital, I realize, well, shit, I got to cancel 10 weeks worth of gigs. I'm not going to do anything for 10 weeks. So I call and the funny thing was, I ended up personally calling everybody that I worked for, and they're immediately like, "Why are you calling me? Like, are you okay? Oh my God, dude! Like, we heard about it and everything." And I'm like, "Well, I just wanted to let you know I'm not going to be able to play for the next 8 weeks." And they're like, "Well, yeah, no shit, dude. You're laying in a hospital with like 1,000,000 broken bones. Like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about your gigs. You're fine. We got you." And so I was like, "Oh, sweet." That was everybody's reaction. Nobody was like, and so it dawned on me a couple hours later, oh, well, shit. I just canceled all these gigs. I can go to Nashville and make this record now. And so I called the singer back, and Brent, "Hey, man," same reaction. "Dude, what are you doing? Are you laying in a hospital?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I guess I'm fine. I'm alive. So, yep, I'm great." And he was like, "Cool." And after we talked for a minute, I'm like, "Well, dude, I just canceled 10 weeks worth of gigs. I'm like, let's go to Nashville and do this record." And he was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I can't lift more than 8 pounds, so somebody's going to have to carry all my gear for me, including my bass and my suitcase and everything. And I get a bed to myself," I said, too.
Yeah.
"I get a bed to myself. I'm not sharing a bed with anybody in this condition. But let's go do it." And he was like, "Okay." And so that led to us going down there, which, again, plays right into this with the benefit. And so they come in and they're visiting me in the hospital, and I'm all like, "Hey guys," all doped up and just like hurting like heck. And they're like, "Timmy's a awesome dude, kind of gruff and very Michigan, very like blunt in the best way." And he's like, "Hey man, we're throwing you a benefit." And I'm like, "No, you're not. You're not throwing me a benefit. Do not do that. I do not want handouts. Please don't do that." And he goes, "Well, it's too late. We already booked the venue in 9 bands." And I was like, cool, I guess. And so the ironic part about that was that benefit was the night before we were to leave to go to Nashville to record this record. Yeah. And I want to say this was at least a month and a half after my accident. I was still on crutches, but I was doing better. No, it couldn't have been that long. It must have been somewhere around there, though, a month after, because I had literally, like, in a month, blown through most of my savings just paying my bills, because times were pretty lean back then. And and I was staying at my grandma's house, all broken and stuff, staying with my grandmother. And I remember the day before the benefit, I came to her and I was like, "Gram, I don't have any money, and I got to go to Nashville in a couple days, and I might need to borrow some money from you just to make this happen, and depending on what happens with this benefit, maybe I'll be able to pay you back in some time, or maybe it won't be a big deal at all," and all this. And she was like, my grandma is a saint, and she was just like, "Oh, honey, whatever you need, I got you. Whatever you need, you just let me know." And I was like, that's so great. And so I go down to the benefit and the day of, and it's like some of my favorite people and musicians, and all pretty regional, local bands, like within probably 200-300 miles, that had come up to play. And my favorite band was this band called 4-Finger-5, and they were just a funk trio that was just nasty as they could possibly be. They were from Muskegon, great singer, guitar player, really, really awesome drummer that studied with this guy who's in Nashville now, 𝐓𝐿𝐴, who's played with Victor Wooten and a bunch of other really, really incredible musicians. He's a literal beast. And that guy, 𝐓𝐿𝐴, used to teach drums in Muskegon, Michigan, and he created so many monster drummers.
I'll bet.
Dude, I mean, incredible. And so, yeah, Steve was a great drummer. And then one of my favorite bass players ever is this dude named Mike Phillips, and he was on bass. And he was like playing with Nipsey Hussle when he passed, and like he's out in LA doing the R&B thing now and doing really well. And Mike and I are good buddies. But anyway, I decided that day, I was like, I'm taking my pedal board and I'm taking my 7-string bass down there, and I'm gonna play with every band that I want to play with that day. I'm gonna sit down in a chair and I'm gonna sit there with my bass and I'm gonna just play with them. I'm gonna jam with them. It's my benefit. I know they'll all be cool with it. I need to play music. I hadn't played a gig in a month or more,
Yeah.
At a certain point, Ricky, the bar owner, comes out and he hands me a wad of cash, dude, that was rolled up like bigger than a Folgers can. It was like this, and he just goes, plop. He goes, "That's like $6,000. And I was like, what? Wow. I'm like, what? He's like, "Yeah, there's another $5,000 or $6,000 from the silent auction, and we're gonna be collecting that over the next couple weeks for you." And I was like, I didn't even know. I was like blown away, dude. Probably tearing up, you know, like a little bit right now even, and just like thinking about it. And so I'm sitting here looking at this money just tripping, dude, going, man, a week ago I was not going to go to Nashville. And even earlier today, I didn't know if I was going to have enough money to go to Nashville. Now I'm holding $6,000, you know, so I can go wherever the hell I want right now. You know what I mean? And I can survive and pay some bills and give my grandma some money and do all the things. And yeah, man. And the next day, Matt, my drummer, came and picked me up. We drove down to Nashville, and that was the first time that I had been back there since since I did Sunseal's CD release party at Bourbon Street Boogie Bar. And we went down to the Sound Kitchen and recorded a record with Skid Mills, Grammy Award-winning producer. And yeah, man. And then did all kinds of cool stuff with that band after that too. So that's pretty wild. But that's how I ended up in Nashville.
Jay, thanks for joining me today and sitting down talking about you and your life through music. But I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Since this is our season-ending episode, would you come back and do another episode and pick up where we left off?
Hell yeah, man.
All right. Come back and see me, man.
Tell
Thanks
you
for
all
coming
about
on.
Nashville, baby.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. See you next time, next season on The Backline.